My husband and my therapist had an affair. She let him read my private notes while convincing me I was too emotional. He used my deepest fears against me and called me crazy when I found their messages. He said, "She helped me see you for what you really are." I was left broke, alone, and gaslit into silence. Until I recorded a session and sent it to the licensing board, and then everything exploded. I remember sitting in her office, the smell of lavender oil and stale coffee making my stomach twist. My therapist, Dr. Lynn, sat across from me, legs crossed neatly, pen tapping her notepad like a metronome. I was crying again, talking about how my husband, Jason, had been distant, secretive, cold. She told me softly, "Maybe he's pulling away because you're projecting your own insecurities onto him." That line gutted me, because she knew my insecurities. She knew everything. Every word I ever said in that office was about my deepest fears, about not being good enough, about being too emotional, too much, too broken. She was supposed to help me heal. Instead, she was using my pain like ammunition. I didn't know it then, but she wasn't just my therapist. She was my husband's new lover. The first time I suspected something was wrong, it was small. Jason came home one night and said, "Lynn says you really need to stop assuming the worst in people." I froze. I had never told him what we discussed in sessions, not word for word like that. I brushed it off, but that sentence burned in my head. Then came the little coincidences. A comment he made that matched something I had said in therapy. Advice he gave me that sounded like her. The way he started calling her Lynn, even though he'd never met her, or so I thought. One night, when he left his phone charging on the counter, I opened it. I wasn't snooping, I was surviving. Something inside me was screaming that I was being played with, and there it was, a text from her. "Next session, tell her you've been feeling unseen again. I want to see how she reacts." My hands went numb. I scrolled up and saw photos, messages, her telling him what I said in confidence, him laughing about it, her giving him insight on how to manage me emotionally. It wasn't just cheating, it was a dissection of my mind. I confronted him that night, shaking, crying, holding his phone in my hand like a weapon. He didn't even deny it. He just said flatly, "She helped me see you for what you really are." Then he walked out. The next few weeks were hell. I was the crazy wife, the unstable one. He told my friends I was obsessed. She told her colleagues I was deteriorating. I called the therapy office to complain. They said I had a history of emotional overreaction. They painted me as delusional. And the worst part? For a while, I started to believe them, until I did the one thing that changed everything. I went back to therapy. I sat in her office with a calm face and a hidden recorder in my purse. And when she said, "You know, Jason told me he's worried about how you twist things," I smiled and nodded. Because I knew right then I finally had her. Jason and I had been married for 7 years. The first 4 were good, really good. We had the kind of quiet, steady marriage people envy. We had Sunday morning pancakes, late-night TV marathons, and inside jokes that lasted for days. Then the miscarriages happened. 2 in 1 year, and I changed. Or at least, that's what everyone told me. I stopped sleeping, started crying at random times, couldn't shake the feeling that I was broken. That's when I decided to go to therapy. I found Dr. Lynn through a friend. She came highly recommended. Warm, empathetic, good with trauma. I trusted her from day one. The first few sessions were intense. I cried a lot. She told me to journal, to write down my triggers, to stop apologizing for my emotions. I actually started feeling like maybe I could get better. She'd smile and say, "You're doing the work and it shows." I believed her. Jason liked her too, not that he'd met her then, but he liked the changes in me. I was calmer, less angry. He even started saying, "Lynn's really helping you." I thought it was sweet. Then came the subtle shifts. Lynn began asking more about Jason, what our fights were about, how he reacted to my breakdowns, whether I thought he was emotionally available. I thought it was standard therapy stuff. But she started talking about him as if she knew him personally. "She sounds like someone with avoidant tendencies," she said once, smiling. "He probably needs space to process." She'd say things like that often, little phrases that shaped how I saw him. At the time, I didn't realize how easily she could plant ideas in my head. When Jason and I argued, her words would replay in my mind. "He needs space. Don't suffocate him." So I'd apologize, back off, and he'd win every fight. Looking back, I can see how calculated it was. how slowly she turned my self-trust into self-doubt. Then Jason started checking in after my sessions. He'd ask things like, "What'd she say today?" Or "Did she think you're improving?" It was flattering at first. I thought he cared about my progress. I had no idea he already knew what was said before I even got home. The real breaking point came about a year later, after I found out Jason had emptied one of our savings accounts. He said it was for repairs on his truck. But Lynn, my therapist, told me maybe I should reflect on why I always assumed dishonesty. That line, in her calm therapist voice, hit me like a slap. I remember thinking, she's defending him. Why is she defending him? But she had a way of making me feel crazy for asking questions. She'd tilt her head, give that little sympathetic smile, and say, "You're catastrophizing again, aren't you?" It worked every time. I'd shrink into myself, doubt my instincts, and leave her office feeling smaller than when I came in. What I didn't know then was that Jason had been helping her understand me better. He said it was to help her help me. She was letting him read my session notes. All of them, every secret, every tear, every ugly thought. And together, they used that information to break me down piece by piece. Until the day I realized something too coincidental to ignore. Jason started quoting words from my private journal. The one I only showed her. It started small, just phrases that made my stomach twist. Jason would say something during an argument like, "You always crave validation, you know that, right?" Or, "You're addicted to control, Lynn says so." At first, I thought I misheard. I'd ask, "What did you just say?" And he'd brush it off with, "You talk about this stuff all the time, I'm just repeating your own words." But they weren't my words, they were hers. Then one night, he said something that made my blood run cold. We were fighting about his late nights again, and out of nowhere, he said, "You wrote in your journal that you feel invisible. I'm tired of being your mirror." I froze. My journal wasn't digital. It was a leather notebook I kept in my nightstand drawer. The only person who ever saw it was Dr. Lynn, when she asked to read a few pages to help her understand my thought patterns. That was when it hit me. He'd read it. She'd let him. The next day, I canceled my upcoming session and called the clinic, asking if my privacy was protected. The receptionist said something vague about confidentiality standards, but her tone was rehearsed, defensive. I hung up shaking. I tried to act normal around Jason, but he started to sense the shift. He got sharper, crueler, almost mocking. I'd say, "You're not supposed to know that," and he'd grin. "Maybe I just know you too well." It was psychological warfare. I'd start a sentence and lose track halfway, doubting my own words. He'd use phrases like, "You're spiraling," or "You're catastrophizing again." Exactly the language Lynn used in therapy. At some point, I began recording my thoughts in voice memos instead of writing them down. That's how I found proof, when I accidentally overheard Jason in the kitchen one night, whispering into the phone. He said, "Yeah, she's slipping again. You were right, guilt works better than confrontation." Pause. Then he laughed softly and added, "You really do know how to get into her head." I sat there on the stairs, frozen, phone clutched in my hand. I knew that voice on the other end. Her soft, clinical calm. The one that once told me, "You're safe here." After that, everything unraveled. Jason stopped pretending to care. He started staying out late, sometimes not coming home at all. And Lynn, she started twisting my sessions even more. Saying things like, "You seem obsessed with control, maybe it's time you give Jason space to breathe." It felt like she was trying to make me unhinged, and it almost worked. Until one night, Jason came home drunk and left his phone on the kitchen table, unlocked. I told myself not to look, that I was done torturing myself. But when it buzzed, I saw her name flash across the screen. "Lynn, you shouldn't have told her that much. She's starting to connect dots." And that's when I realized this wasn't just an affair, it was a setup, a psychological experiment. I needed proof, real, undeniable proof. So I called the clinic the next morning and said I was ready to resume therapy. Lynn sounded pleased. "I'm glad you're choosing to trust again." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'm finally ready to talk." I walked into that session 2 days later with my purse zipped tight, a small digital recorder buried under my wallet. And when she started talking about my husband's concerns, I hit record. The session started like any other. Soft jazz humming in the background, her voice low and careful. She wore a pale pink blouse that day, matching lipstick, hair perfect. I sat across from her, pretending to be calm. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard I thought the recorder would pick it up. She smiled and said, "You seem tense today." "Did something happen at home?" I said. "No, just thinking a lot." She leaned forward. "About Jason," I nodded, watching her face carefully. "He's been different lately." Her smile flickered, just a second, but I caught it. "Different how?" I played dumb. "More distant, and sometimes it feels like he already knows what I'm going to say before I say it." Her eyes softened with practiced sympathy. "You've always had a tendency to project that kind of pattern. Remember when you accused him of reading your journal?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, that was a mistake, wasn't it?" She gave that therapist smile, the kind that's supposed to mean safety but now looked like a smirk. "It's progress that you can admit that." I stared at her, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You think I should apologize to him again?" "I think it might help rebuild trust," she said smoothly. "Jason told me he's been trying, but you're shutting him out." And there it was. Jason told me. The words slipped out of her like a reflex. She froze, realizing it too late. I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Wait, you said Jason told you. When did you talk to him?" She blinked fast. "Oh, just hypothetically. I meant if you were to tell me that." "No," I cut her off. My voice cracked, raw and trembling. "You said it like you've talked to him." The silence that followed was thick. Her face went pale. Then she did something that still makes my blood boil. She tried to gaslight me in real time. She smiled again, too quickly, and said, "I think you're hearing what you want to hear like last time. Remember how we talked about your paranoia?" But I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't fold. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "Funny, because my recorder heard it too." Her entire expression changed. The warmth vanished. Her lips tightened, eyes cold. "You're not allowed to record in here without consent," she snapped. "Oh, I know," I said quietly. "But I figured you weren't exactly playing by the rules either." She stood up. "This session is over." I didn't move. "Sure, but before I go, maybe you should delete the folder labeled Case Notes JH on your laptop. You know, the one where you store copies of my therapy summaries for Jason." Her face drained of color. "You've been in my files?" I smiled, the first real smile I'd had in months. "You're not the only one who knows how to dig." Truth was, I hadn't accessed her laptop. I just guessed. But judging by her reaction, I'd hit dead center. She didn't call security, she didn't even argue. She just sat down slowly, breathing hard, staring at the floor like her world was caving in. I stood up, adjusted my bag, and said, "You can keep pretending, but I'm done being your experiment." Then I left. That night, Jason came home furious. "What the hell did you say to Lynn?" I stared at him, heart pounding. "Enough," I said. "Enough to make her nervous." He glared, eyes wild. "You're going to regret this." But he was wrong. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of him. I was angry, focused. And that's when I decided it was time to take everything from both of them, legally, publicly, and permanently. After that session, something in me snapped into clarity. The fear, the confusion, the fog they'd built around me, it all burned off like mist in sunlight. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was the problem they didn't see coming. I spent that night sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a legal pad beside me. The recorder sat in front of me, replaying her voice on loop. "Jason told me he's been trying, but you're shutting him out." That was all I needed, proof that she'd been breaching confidentiality. But I wanted more. I wanted every word, every piece of evidence that showed how deep this manipulation went. So I started planning. Step 1, secure the audio. I uploaded the file to 3 cloud drives, one under a fake name. I backed it up on a flash drive I hid in the battery compartment of a remote control. Step 2, document everything. I made a timeline, sessions, arguments, messages, the exact phrases they'd both used that matched word for word. Every emotional bruise became data. Step 3, follow the money. I called the bank, pretending to be clueless about joint account activity. When they emailed me the transaction history, I saw it, Venmo payments from Jason to a LL Consulting. Her initials. The note said Sessions, support, thank you. She was getting paid off the books. Step 4, contact a lawyer quietly. I found a family law attorney in Dallas named Michelle who specialized in therapist misconduct and emotional abuse. I told her everything, even played the recording. She didn't interrupt once. When it ended, she just said, "We'll burn them legally before you ever have to raise your voice." I almost cried. Michelle told me to keep going to therapy, just one more session. Let her talk, she said. The more she says, the worse she looks. So I did. The next session, I wore a simple black sweater and acted fragile again, like the old me. Lynn softened instantly, probably relieved. She even said, "I'm glad you're calm today." Jason told me he's worried about how isolated you've been. Another breach, another nail in her coffin. Afterward, I texted Jason, "Can we meet tonight? I want to talk about us." He agreed, smug as ever. Probably thought I was crawling back. But I had already spoken to Michelle about what I'd do next. Report both of them, to the licensing board, to his employer, to anyone who would listen. That night, I met him at a bar near downtown. I played it cool. We sat in a booth and I said, "I've been thinking about what Lynn said." His eyes flicked up. "What did she say? That you two talk about me more than you talk to me?" His face shifted. "That's not what this is about. Don't bother," I cut in. "I've got everything I need, recordings, payments, session notes, even your texts." He went pale. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Then call my bluff." He didn't. He just sat there, jaw tight, hands shaking. When I left, he texted me, "You're making a huge mistake." I didn't reply. I was already on my way home, emailing the entire packet, audio files, screenshots, bank transfers, to the Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists. It took 3 hours to upload everything. At 2:43 a.m., I hit send, and then, finally, I slept. But the next morning, something happened I didn't expect. Lynn called me, not from her office line, from a private number. And what she said turned everything I thought I knew upside down. Her voice came through the phone soft but shaking. "We need to talk, not in my office, somewhere private." I almost hung up. But something in her tone, fear, not arrogance, made me hesitate. I agreed to meet her in a cafe across town, one that was quiet enough to hear a heartbeat. When I walked in, she was already there. No makeup, hair pulled back, looking 10 years older than I remembered. She kept glancing at the door like someone was watching. I sat down slowly. "If this is about the board," she cut me off. "He's dangerous." I blinked. "Jason," she nodded, gripping her coffee cup like it might shatter. "You think I betrayed you, but you don't understand what he did to me." I laughed bitterly. "You slept with my husband and shared my private therapy notes. I think I understand plenty." Her eyes filled with tears, but not the fake kind I'd seen in her office. "He blackmailed me," she whispered. "He found out about an old malpractice complaint, nothing serious, but it could have ruined me. He said if I didn't help him manage you, he'd leak it. At first it was small things, asking me to suggest you work on your trust issues, to convince you were paranoid. Then he wanted to know everything you said." I just stared. "He said it was part of helping you," she continued, voice breaking. "But when he started showing up at my house, when he started recording me, I couldn't stop it anymore. He said he'd ruin both of us if I didn't play along." The room tilted for a second. The story was insane, but the fear in her voice sounded real. Still, I couldn't trust her. "So what, you're a victim now?" I said coldly. "That's your defense," she shook her head. "No, I'm telling you because he's not done with you." My stomach twisted. "He's been planning to make you look unstable, completely unfit. He's been talking to an attorney. He wants to take everything. The house, your accounts, your name. He said once you're officially crazy, nobody will believe a word you say." I stared at her, pulse pounding. "Why are you telling me this now?" She looked around, lowering her voice. "Because he's done with me too. He sent me a text last night, 'You served your purpose.' I think he's setting me up." I wanted to scream, but I just said, "You think I should feel sorry for you?" "No," she said quietly. "I think you should be ready." Then she slid something across the table, a flash drive. "Everything he sent me, the recordings, the emails, the payments, it's all there." I didn't touch it at first. I just stared at her. "Why would you give this to me?" she swallowed. "Because if I disappear, you'll know who did it." And then she left. That night, I plugged the flash drive into my computer. Folder after folder opened, Jason's name everywhere. But then, at the very bottom, there was a hidden folder titled Project Reset. Inside were screenshots, voice memos, and something worse, notes written by Jason himself, his handwriting, his words. Objective: destabilize subject emotionally, manipulate perception of self through therapist. Phase 3, isolate and discredit. It wasn't just cheating. It was a calculated psychological campaign. And suddenly, it all made sense. The way he'd mirrored therapy phrases, the way he'd timed his anger, the way he'd recorded me during breakdowns. He hadn't been trying to fix me. He'd been trying to erase me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of the screen, reading his words over and over until they burned into me. The folders were labeled like case files, dates, phases, progress reports. It looked methodical, scientific. Each file started with the same line: subject, else spouse, objective, rebuild control. I scrolled down, numb. He had been tracking me for months, documenting how I reacted to specific words, fights, therapy sessions, even how long it took me to apologize after arguments. Every file had a new entry, a little more detached, a little colder. But then I found the one that explained everything. A note at the top of a document dated almost 2 years ago, right after our second miscarriage. Elle's mental instability is the perfect opportunity. If I can discredit her, she loses everything. The house, the savings, the sympathy. She'll be too broken to fight. And underneath that, she's her father's daughter. I'll finish what he started. My throat closed. I didn't understand at first. Then it clicked. Jason had known about my father, about how he manipulated my mother, gaslit her until she had a breakdown. I'd told him everything years ago when I still believed in trust. He'd studied my trauma like a playbook. Scrolling further, I saw his motive spelled out in his own words. She's the only witness who could ruin me. There were emails attached, messages between him and an investor. Jason had been quietly embezzling funds from the small business he co-owned, and the paper trail led directly to our joint accounts. If I ever found out, I could have exposed him. So he built a narrative. The unstable wife, the emotional breakdown, the therapist who tried to help. Lynn wasn't part of the plan at first. She was a tool he found and corrupted. When she hesitated, he turned the same psychological tactics on her: guilt, manipulation, blackmail. In one file, I read his message to her. She trusts you completely. If you plant doubt, she'll self-destruct faster. You're the professional. No one will question you. It made me sick. He'd destroyed my mental health, my marriage, my finances, all to protect himself from a fraud case. Everything I'd thought was emotional chaos was actually precision. Every panic attack, every gaslighted apology, it was part of his system. The man I'd loved, cried for, defended, he wasn't impulsive or lost. He was calculated. When I finished reading, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the flash drive. I sat there staring at the floor, whispering, he really did it on purpose. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Michelle. I showed her everything. She didn't even flinch. She said, this isn't just misconduct. It's psychological abuse and financial fraud. Then she looked me in the eye and said, we're going to take him apart piece by piece, but I need you to stay quiet until I say otherwise. So I waited. Lynn's license was already under review. Jason was still smug, still texting like nothing had changed. He had no idea the evidence was sitting in 3 separate inboxes, labeled and time-stamped. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. The silence before the fallout was almost unbearable. For 2 weeks, I lived like a ghost, working, eating, smiling on cue, while Michelle and her team quietly dismantled Jason's entire scheme. Every piece of evidence was lined up like dominoes. The recordings, the payment logs, his project reset files, even screenshots of him texting Lynn instructions on how to restructure my emotional narrative. Then came the day Michelle called and said simply, it's time. It started with the board hearing for Lynn. They played the recordings, my audio proof, and excerpts from Jason's notes. She didn't deny anything. She broke down crying in the middle of the session, admitting that she'd violated confidentiality, that she'd let him into my therapy notes under pressure. The board revoked her license on the spot. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. Just an odd, quiet calm, like watching a car crash from the side of the road. Jason's turn came next. Michelle had forwarded everything to his business partner and to the DA's office. The embezzlement trail was clear. Transfers from his company to our joint account, then into Lynn's consulting payments. Within days, his partner froze the business accounts and filed a civil claim. That's when Jason showed up at my apartment. He pounded on the door, shouting through it like a madman. You think you can ruin me? You don't even know what's coming. I stood on the other side, phone in my hand, recording everything. I didn't respond, just listened. He yelled for another minute, then something broke in his voice. You did this to yourself, he said, quieter now. You always do. Then he left. 3 days later, he was arrested. Fraud, identity theft, coercion, and unlawful access to confidential medical records. They seized his phone, his computer, and found his notes about me. The detective told me, "He treated your mind like a lab experiment. You're lucky you caught it." Lucky. That word stuck in my throat. When the story hit local news, people who'd called me unstable started messaging me apologies. Friends, my old boss, even my mother. They all said the same thing. I had no idea. But I knew. I'd been screaming it for months, they just weren't listening. I didn't respond to any of them, I didn't need to. Instead, I drove to a small lake outside of town, the one Jason and I used to visit early in our marriage. I sat there at sunset, watching the water shift between gold and blue. The air was quiet, soft. I took out my phone, opened a new recording, and said, "My name is Elle, I'm not crazy. I was never crazy. I was conditioned to believe I was." Then I hit save and deleted every other recording that came before it. Every trace of their voices, their poison, gone. In the end, Jason lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. Lynn moved out of state after her license was revoked. The last I heard, she was working at a wellness spa under a different name. I didn't care. My bank accounts were unfrozen. My name was cleared. And me, I started therapy again, with someone new, someone real. This time, I chose a man in his 60s who began our first session with, "You've been through psychological warfare. Let's rebuild your trust in yourself first." I nodded and said, "That's exactly what I want." When I walked out of that session, the air felt different, lighter, sharper. I wasn't broken anymore, just wiser, harder. And as for Jason's little project reset, let's just say the reset finally worked, just not the way he planned.